In a recent stream, I raised the question, how many of you haven't played Demon's Souls? And after a quick Twitter poll, I confirmed that 60% of my audience hasn't played. This incredible music from the Demon's Souls soundtrack accurately represents my sadness at that fact. Because my audience is entirely made up of Soul Sekiro-born fans, and as Seki-born Souls fans know, it's difficult to play just one of these Blood Seki Souls games, and not touch the others. To many of us, Demon's Souls is the game that started it all. But as From Software continues iterating on its success, new players are entering the series at later and later points, and as new sequels are created, Demon's Souls is being forgotten, locked not only behind PlayStation exclusivity, but also exclusivity in an older console generation, the PlayStation 3, which is exactly why it deserves a remaster, more than Dark Souls ever did, to be honest. This was the first Souls game they ever made, and it could really do with some quality of life changes, not to mention updated frame rates and textures, since this is also a game that never got a PC release, and let's be honest, it never will, so there's no way of experiencing these textures in higher resolution, nor frame rates at a stable 60. The closest you can get is emulation, and PS3 emulation has come a really long way in recent years. It's come so far, in fact, that I bet you didn't even realize this, but the footage that you're seeing is from the emulated version. If you don't own a PS3, this is an option, but please, if you do end up going down this route, purchase the game as well. It's $25, even if you don't have a PS3, just grab a physical version in store or a digital version from Sony's website. It's the right thing to do. Demon's Souls takes place in the age of the Second Scourge. The land of Boletaria is enveloped by fog, and demons have taken over, and they're enriching their own souls with the souls of humans. Many warriors venture into the fog to figure out what's going on, but only one makes it out, and he's a royal knight named Valifax. Valifax tells of King Alant, who, in his lust for power, awakened an elder being called the Old One. The Old One beckoned the fog, the demons, and it also unlocked the mystical soul arts, which is a tool that you may choose to use, though you do risk becoming one of the demons that you've set out to destroy. This isn't the first time this scourge has happened. It is called the Second Scourge, after all, and if someone doesn't enter the fog and defeat the demons, it might be the last scourge. I have a short series of Demon's Souls videos if you want to learn more, and I really should make more, because Demon's Souls is special. I find From Software games really hard to rank, because they all have strengths and weaknesses that the others don't, but nothing, from Dark Souls to Sekiro, beats Demon's Souls in terms of atmosphere and ambience, in my opinion. I mean, just listen to this clip. I swear, the atmosphere in 5 seconds of Latria is thicker than in the entirety of Irithyll Dungeon. The rattling of bars, the screams of the prisoners, the piercing chime of those Mind Flayer bells, it's legitimately chilling and oppressive when you go through here, and what makes it genius is that this is a feeling that is reinforced by the gameplay itself. This is one of the few areas in Souls that still intimidates me, even though I've played through it tens of times by now. There's this gameplay loop in this section, which has you peering into cells for loot and to avoid enemies, yet the real goal of this repetitive, horizontal process is to dull your awareness of the occasional vertical death trap that's lurking in the shadows. Furthermore, every damn corridor looks the same, and the keys are placed so far from the doors that they unlock that it forces you to retrace your steps and double back, a process that masks your sense of progression through this place, so even though you're outside of these cells, you feel like a prisoner, and there's no sound more terrifying to a prisoner than this aggravated warning bell of the Mind Flayers. It's an enemy that can easily one-shot even the most accomplished player, to be honest, if you let down your guard. And pretty much every area in Demon's Souls has this much character. Enemies, sound effects, level design, gameplay, they're all there and they all make the worlds feel lived in and distinct. there's Boletaria Castle, with this theme of archers who attack you at range, at the same time soldiers attack you in melee. They're coordinated. By contrast, there's the Stonefang tunnels, with these resilient miners who can be dangerous, but who usually barely pay you any attention. They're just in the background, focusing on their work instead. And if you accidentally aggro them, then it's pretty rough. There's the Shrine of Storms, which has this visual aesthetic to it that's actually never been replicated in subsequent games. It's this level that makes you sort of fear the open sky, and it forces you to listen to noises coming from the sky so that you can avoid javelins coming your way. And then there's the next level of Latria, which is one of my favorites. It has you standing and fighting on these narrow platforms against these gargoyles that are besieging you, and all the while you're fighting to the beat of this enormous heart that looms over you the entire time. And who can forget OG Blighttown? As opposed to other swamp areas, it's even broader, with no real landmarks in it. The rain is pouring down so hard you can barely see, and later on you get to these hovels where the flies are so thick in the air that you actually kind of do feel bad for invading this place. And the cool thing about these levels is that you can play them in virtually any order, which is a design decision I think helped the devs fully realize their vision for these areas, because they didn't have to design them so that they blend into one another, you know? Additionally, being able to access most of the game from the get-go vastly expands the character builds that you can go for. So to build this sorcerer build, for example, I went to one of the most difficult sections of the Shrine of Storms and defeated the skeletons with my bare fists because that uses blunt damage, and then I got this powerful curved blade, which in turn allowed me to tackle different sections of the game, like Latria, where I could quickly unlock Soul Ray, which is this piercing, powerful main spell that can carry you the rest of the game, basically. Actually, I feel like the magic in Demon Souls was really ahead of its successors in many ways. Yes, it's very overpowered, but man, I'd actually prefer that to how weak and uninspired magic kind of feels in the sequels. Mana can regenerate over time here, and also when you use consumables, which feels more natural in my opinion. Plus, Demon Souls magic can be cast really quickly, and many spells can be used while you're moving, so this led to really fast-paced PvP. Alas, the servers have been taken offline now, which is another reason a remaster would go down really well. I particularly enjoyed how magic switched up my experiences with a lot of the bosses. My fight with the armor spider became this long-ranged battle of timing, and boss fights that required stealth were made more interesting thanks to spells like Cloak, which hides your presence. I think the reason that magic interfaces well with Demon Souls bosses is because the bosses here are far more gimmicky than in the sequels, and I absolutely don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean that the bosses here in this game have more overt strengths and weaknesses than in the sequels. Bosses in Dark Souls and beyond largely come down to timing, reflexes, and skill, which, don't get me wrong, is still an amazing experience, but bosses in Demon Souls are more of a puzzle. They're difficult in the beginning, and then easier when you figure out how to solve it. The end result of this is boss designs that are incredibly memorable, and they have a ton of character to them, like the old hero who attacks you based on the sounds you make, or the Fool's Idol, who conjures mirror versions of herself, or Maiden Astraya, who barely fights back at all, relying instead on her brave knight to take you down instead. Every single boss is like this, pretty much, and I would rant and rave about every one of them, but I'd probably spoil your experiences if you haven't played. The music in these fights is amazing too. Most of them include choirs, and they're really orchestral arrangements that do stand out from songs in subsequent titles. Everyone who gets addicted to Souls games usually has a boss that they struggled against for hours, right? And I want to hear about what yours was in the comments. Back then, mine was Flame Lurker. He's one of the few bosses in Demon Souls that requires really straightforward mechanical skill to beat. He's aggressive to the point where you can't abuse spam healing, which is a problem in Demon Souls. And there's lava on the floor to watch out for, and he powers up as the fight goes on, making it so that if you get greedy at the end, you get punished. I think I ended up having such a hard time back in the day that I ended up coming back to the game later and rolling a new character with this focus in mind to defeat Flame Lurker. So I picked up a heavy flame-resistant shield in the first level, and I completely specced into strength just so I could carry this huge shield and have a really easy time against the boss. Demon's Souls in general has more RPG elements. It has exploitable damage types like flame damage and blunt damage seem to make more of a difference, and there are way more varied upgrade materials. And also there's inventory management, which some may like, some may dislike. I think most people hate the fact that in Demon's Souls, a common occurrence is not being able to carry loot on the ground and having to discard something. That's pretty frustrating. And I think back then, I also didn't know how world tendency worked, so I probably made my Flame Lurker fight way harder. So for those of you who don't know, Demon's Souls had this insane death penalty mechanic, whereby enemies in a stage would become more dangerous and do more damage every time that you died in that level in human form. The only way around this was not to die, or you could play in phantom form at 50% health so that you wouldn't risk making your area harder if you did die, which was a trade-off that most players were happy with because it stopped their difficulty spiraling out of control. The fact that they put this in is such a brave decision, to put such a punishing mechanic in the first Souls game, no less. During its development, Demon's Souls actually became known internally as a failed project, until Hidetaka Miyazaki took the reins. He went on to say this great quote. He said, "I figured if I could find a way to take control of the game, I could turn it into anything I wanted. Best of all, if my ideas failed, nobody would care. It was already considered a failure." So this led to a lot of risks, like world tendency being taken, and while the game certainly wasn't a success at launch, there was this word-of-mouth effect that eventually spread of this deep, punishing game from Japan. And then Namco Bandai and Atlus eventually decided to publish it in the West. I know I heard about it from word of mouth. I heard stories about this final boss that could drain the levels from you that you'd accumulated throughout the game, and I thought, damn, that sounds so metal. So, what is the actual likelihood of a remaster? Earlier this year, there was this interview with Game Informer where Miyazaki mentioned that a remaster was possible, but only if it was a studio that really loved the original work and really put their heart and soul into realizing it again, then that's something I would enjoy. He goes on to cite this discomfort with looking back on his previous works, but he says that I understand that there are many users and many players and fans out there who really love Demons, so if that's something they could accomplish with a studio that loved the work, then yeah, I'd be okay with that. Of course, this all relies on Sony too. He says you'd have to see what they're thinking about it. And it seems like a no-brainer, right? As I feel like a remaster would offer something valuable to those looking to play it again, but then they could also engage millions of new players with this. Millions of people don't own a PS3, but they have started playing From Software games in the past few years, whether on PC or Xbox or even PS4. Considering that From Software have a good relationship with Sony, assumedly, Bloodborne sold really well, and that the PS5 is looming in 2020, a remaster would pull the entire Souls community into the PS5 ecosystem, similar to what they did with Bloodborne. I thought about starting a petition for this, and while I'm convinced that there's this unbridled desire From Software fans that would make a petition successful, I don't know if I feel comfortable putting that kind of pressure on From Software yet. Ask me again in a few years, because I really can't imagine a remaster never being made. So, for now, I hope that this video at least helped the 60% of you who haven't played Demon's Souls kind of understand why it's a work of art and why it has such a cult following. To those of you who have played Demon's Souls, please share something you love about the game, whether it's a location, a boss, or an experience, down in the comments below. Or maybe use the hashtag DESRemaster on Twitter if you want to get trendy with it. And to Sony, please.
It's free real estate.
Before I end this video, I want to show off the Sennheiser PC37X. It's this really good budget headset that's currently $30 off if you use the link in the description. And it's a product I was already recommending to friends even before Drop reached out to me. I used to use Drop.com way back when it was still called Massdrop, and I always liked their collaborations with big brands because they tend to clean up their designs and also offer a cheaper price on top of that. This clean, matte black headset is no exception. So first up, it has an open-backed design, which I personally prefer and use over closed-back headphones. Open-back headphones prevent heat buildup, they afford a more natural sort of sound, which is great for editing, and you can actually hear sounds that are around you while you're gaming or listening to music. Since I've been playing Demon's Souls all week, there were moments in-game, in Latria in particular, where having good surround sound just saved my life, being able to track enemies behind me. And also, if you want to adjust that volume, the headphones also come with a volume slider on the right ear cup, which is something you'll come to swear by once you've gotten used to it. One thing that does usually bother me with headsets is that they often skimp out on the microphone quality, because usually, if you think about it, it's your friends hearing the microphone, not the user, so manufacturers often let it slide. However, one of the best selling points of these headphones is that the mic quality is way better than its competitors at this price point. Which, as you can hear now, has lots of body and a detail to it that is only enhanced by the inbuilt noise cancelling. The PC37X punches way above its weight for the price point, so check it out in the description below if you're in the market for this kind of thing. Thank you to Drop for sponsoring me and letting me try my hand at being a tech YouTuber. It was actually a lot of fun filming something completely different like this, so I appreciate the opportunity. But thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.